The blood had soaked through her sleeve before Zelda Morgan even realized how deep the gash was. And now, as the afternoon sun beat down on the Dakota plains, she pressed her hand against the wound and searched desperately for yarrow among the tall grasses. She had been riding hard for 3 days since the stagecoach robbery outside Bismarck, North Dakota, and the bullet that grazed her arm during her escape was starting to burn with infection. The year was 1883, and out here in the territory, a woman alone with a festering wound had 2 choices: find help or die trying. Zelda had chosen the former, though her definition of help did not include another living soul. She had learned long ago that people were more dangerous than any wound, more treacherous than any fever. Her father had taught her about herbs before he died, back when she was just a girl in Ohio, and she had spent the last 6 years putting that knowledge to use as she drifted from town to town, working as a seamstress, a cook, anything that kept her moving and kept her free. The men who had robbed the stagecoach had not expected a woman to fight back, and she had managed to grab the strongbox and run while they were distracted with the other passengers. She had hidden the box in a hollow tree 2 miles back, planning to return for it once she had tended to her wound. But first, she needed to find the right herbs. The prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, golden grasses bending in the hot wind, and Zelda felt her vision swim as she crouched low, searching. Yarrow, she needed yarrow for the bleeding, and then comfrey or plantain for the infection. Her fingers trembled as she pushed aside the stems, her dark hair falling loose from its braid and sticking to her sweaty forehead. She was 23 years old, and she had survived worse than this, she told herself. She had survived her mother's death, her father's drinking, the fire that took their house, and her youngest brother with it. She had survived the man who tried to force her into marriage back in St. Louis, and the winter she spent sleeping in a barn in Wyoming. She would survive this too. But the blood kept coming, and the herbs kept eluding her, and when she finally spotted a cluster of white yarrow flowers near a rocky outcropping, she stumbled forward with a gasp of relief that turned into a cry of pain as her legs gave out beneath her. She hit the ground hard, her wounded arm screaming, and for a moment she just lay there in the grass, breathing hard and tasting dust. That was when she heard the horse. Zelda forced her head up, her good hand going instinctively to the knife at her belt, but her vision was too blurred to see clearly. She made out the shape of a rider, tall in the saddle, moving toward her at an easy pace. A man, of course. Out here it was always a man, and men meant trouble. She tried to push herself up, but her arms would not cooperate, and she fell back with a frustrated sound that was half sob, half snarl. The rider dismounted a few yards away and approached slowly, his boots crunching on the dry earth. Zelda blinked hard, trying to clear her vision, and gradually his features came into focus. He was young, maybe 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, dusty denim pants, a faded blue shirt, a well-worn hat that shaded his face. His eyes were a startling gray-green, like storm clouds over spring grass, and they were fixed on her with an expression of concern that Zelda did not trust for 1 second. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and calm, the kind of voice you used with spooked horses. "I am not going to hurt you." "Stay back," Zelda managed, though her voice came out weaker than she intended. She still had her hand on her knife, but she was not sure she had the strength to draw it. The cowboy held up his hands, showing them empty. "I am just passing through on my way to Bismarck. Saw you fall. Looks like you are hurt pretty bad." His gaze went to her arm, where the blood had seeped through both her sleeve and the makeshift bandage she had tied hours ago. His expression tightened. "That needs tending." "I can tend it myself," Zelda said through gritted teeth. "I just need those yarrow flowers over there. Then you can be on your way." He glanced at the white cluster she had been reaching for, then back at her. "Yarrow is good for bleeding," he said, surprising her. "But you have got infection starting too. You will need something stronger. There is wild bergamot growing near the creek about a quarter-mile south, and I saw some comfrey on my ride up. I can gather them for you if you like." Zelda stared at him, trying to reconcile this cowboy who knew herbs with every other man she had encountered in her years of running. "Why would you do that?" He tilted his head slightly as if the question itself puzzled him. "Because you need help, and I can provide it. Is that not reason enough? No one does anything without wanting something in return." "Well, I suppose that is true most of the time, he admitted. "But right now, all I want is to make sure you do not die out here on the prairie. My name is Yates Orson, and I work for the Rockingham Ranch about 10 miles east of here. I give you my word, I mean you no harm." Zelda wanted to laugh at that. A man's word. What was that worth? But her arm was throbbing, and the world was starting to tilt in a way that frightened her more than this stranger did. She had seen men die of infected wounds, had watched them burn with fever and cry out in delirium. If this Yates Orson knew where to find the herbs she needed, refusing his help might be the last prideful thing she ever did. "Fine," she said finally, "get the herbs, but stay where I can see you." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face, but he nodded seriously. "I will gather what is nearby first." He walked to the yarrow and began picking the flowers carefully, his movements practiced. As he worked, he kept talking, his voice steady and soothing. "I learned about herbs from my mother. She was half Dakota, grew up knowing every plant on these plains and what they were good for. She passed 5 years ago, but I still remember everything she taught me. Yarrow for bleeding, like I said. Bergamot is good for infections, draws out the poison. Comfrey helps with healing, but you have to be careful with it because it works almost too well, can seal up a wound before it is properly clean." Despite herself, Zelda listened. Her father had taught her the basics, but he had been an Ohio farmer, and his knowledge had run more toward cultivated gardens than the wild prairie plants. This cowboy spoke with the confidence of someone who had used these remedies, not just read about them. He brought the yarrow to her and crouched down a respectful distance away. "Do you mind if I look at that wound? I will not touch you, just want to see what we are dealing with." Zelda hesitated, then slowly moved her hand away from her arm. The sleeve was stuck to the wound with dried blood, and when Yates leaned closer to examine it, his expression grew serious. "How did this happen?" he asked. "Does it matter?" "No, I suppose not." He sat back on his heels. "It is not as bad as it could be, but it needs to be cleaned properly and packed with the herbs. You are not going to be able to do that one-handed. Will you let me help you?" Every instinct Zelda had screamed at her to refuse, but the practical part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive this long, knew he was right. "If you try anything," she said slowly, "I will kill you." "I believe you would try," Yates said, and this time there was definitely amusement in his voice. "Come on, let me get you over to the shade by those rocks, and then I will fetch the other herbs and some water. I have a canteen on my horse." He stood and offered his hand. Zelda ignored it and tried to push herself up, but the moment she put weight on her wounded arm, pain lanced through her shoulder, and she gasped. Before she could fall again, Yates had moved in close and caught her around the waist with one arm, supporting her weight easily. "Stubborn," he muttered, but not unkindly. He half carried her to the rocky outcropping and helped her settle with her back against the sun-warmed stone. Then he went to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding, and returned with a canteen and a worn leather saddlebag. "Stay put, I will be right back." Zelda watched him stride off toward the south, moving with the long, easy gait of a man who spent most of his life on his feet or in the saddle. She should be planning her escape, she thought. The moment he was out of sight, she should get up and run. But she knew she would not make it 10 steps before collapsing, and besides, she found herself curious about this Yates Orson who helped strange women in the middle of nowhere and talked about his Lakota mother like the memory was something precious. He was back within 15 minutes, his hands full of plants. He had found the bergamot, its purple-pink flowers distinctive even from a distance, and several comfrey leaves with their large, rough texture. He had also gathered some wild sage and a plant Zelda did not recognize. "Echinacea," he explained, holding up the purple coneflower. "Helps fight infection from the inside. You can chew it or make it into tea." He set everything down carefully and pulled a small pot from his saddlebag, along with matches and a knife. "I am going to make a fire and boil some water. Clean the wound first, then apply the herbs." "You carry a pot with you?" Zelda asked, surprised. "I spend a lot of time on the trail. Get tired of eating cold food." He gathered some dried grass and small sticks and built a neat fire, then filled the pot with water from his canteen and set it over the flames. While it heated, he crushed some of the yarrow flowers and bergamot leaves between 2 smooth stones, creating a paste. His movements were efficient and sure, and Zelda found herself relaxing slightly despite her better judgment. "You do this often?" she asked. "Help wounded strangers?" "Not as often as you might think." Yates glanced up at her with a slight smile. Most people are not out here alone bleeding in the grass. Are you going to tell me what happened? No. Fair enough. He tested the water with his finger, then nodded in satisfaction. This is ready. I need to clean that wound now, and it is going to hurt. Do you want something to bite down on? Zelda shook her head. She had learned to handle pain a long time ago. Yates moved closer, and this time she did not pull away when he gently took her arm. He had soaked a piece of cloth in the hot water, and when he began dabbing at the dried blood, she felt the wound reopen and start bleeding again. She bit the inside of her cheek, but did not make a sound. Tell me if you need me to stop, Yates said quietly. He was focused on his work, his touch surprisingly gentle for someone with hands that showed calluses and old scars. He cleaned away the dried blood and dirt, revealing a gash about 3 inches long across her upper arm. It was not deep enough to have hit anything vital, but it was ragged and inflamed. What did this? It does not look like an animal. It was not. Yates did not press further. He rinsed the cloth and continued cleaning until the wound was as clear as he could get it, then picked up the paste he had made. This will sting, he warned, then carefully packed the mixture into and around the gash. Zelda felt a burning sensation that made her vision blur again. But almost immediately afterward, there was a cooling effect that eased some of the pain. Bergamot does that, Yates said, noticing her expression. Hurts first, then helps. He pulled a clean cloth from his saddlebag and began tearing it into strips. I am going to bind this tight to stop the bleeding. It should stay on for at least a day. Then you will need to change it and reapply the herbs. Do you have somewhere to go? Someone who can help you? I will manage. That is not what I asked. He began wrapping her arm, his fingers working quickly and carefully. Bismarck is not far. There is a doctor there, and a boarding house run by a woman named Mrs. Fletcher, who does not ask too many questions. I cannot go to Bismarck. Why not? Zelda pressed her lips together. She had already said too much, but when she looked at Yates, she saw only genuine concern in those storm-colored eyes, and something about that made her chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with her wound. Because the law might be looking for me, she said finally, and waited for him to pull away, to stand up and leave her here, or worse, to threaten to turn her in. Instead, Yates just finished tying off the bandage and sat back. What did you do? I took something that did not belong to me. Did you have a good reason? The question surprised her. Does that matter? It does to me. Zelda studied him for a long moment. He was watching her steadily, waiting, and she found herself wanting to tell him the truth in a way she had not wanted to trust anyone in years. The stagecoach I was on got robbed 3 days ago. 4 men, armed and mean. They took everything from the passengers, and when one of the men, an old farmer, tried to hide his money, they beat him, would have killed him if the driver had not intervened. In the confusion, I grabbed the strongbox they had taken and ran. I figured if anyone deserved that money, it was the people they stole it from, not those thieves. So you are not a thief, Yates said slowly. You are trying to return stolen property. I am a thief who stole from thieves, Zelda corrected. The law will not see much difference. The law does not always see things clearly. Yates poured some of the remaining hot water into a tin cup and added a few pieces of the echinacea root. Drink this. It tastes terrible, but it will help. He handed her the cup and she took it, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, and from the way Yates quickly pulled his hand back, she thought maybe he had felt it too. She sipped the tea and grimaced. He had not been lying about the taste. Thank you, she said after a moment, for helping me. You did not have to. No, I suppose I did not. Yates stood and began packing away his things, and Zelda felt a strange pang of disappointment. Of course he was leaving. Why would he stay? He had done his good deed for the day, and now he would ride off to his ranch and his normal life, and she would be alone again. But instead of mounting his horse, Yates came back and sat down beside her, far enough away to be respectful, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. Where is the strongbox now? He asked. Hidden, safe. And what were you planning to do with it? Zelda had not let herself think that far ahead. She had been focused only on surviving, on getting away, on finding herbs and treating her wound. I do not know, she admitted. Return it somehow, I suppose. Leave it somewhere it could be found and return to the rightful owners. That is a good plan in theory, but those robbers are probably still looking for it. And if the law is involved, they will be asking questions about a woman matching your description. Yates was quiet for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. I have a proposition for you. I knew there would be a catch. He smiled, a real smile this time that reached his eyes and made him look younger and somehow more handsome. Not the kind of catch you are thinking. Listen first. The Rockingham Ranch where I work is owned by a good man named Samuel Martin. He is fair, honest, and he does not involve himself in other people's business unless asked. The ranch is remote enough that no one would think to look for you there, and we always need extra hands during the summer. Can you cook? I can cook, Zelda said slowly, not sure where this was going. Then come work at the ranch. You will have a place to stay while your arm heals, you will earn some money, and you will have time to figure out what to do about that strongbox. In a week or two, when things have died down, I will help you return it however you want. Why would you do that? You do not know me. For all you know, I am lying about everything. Maybe you are, Yates said, but I do not think so. I am a pretty good judge of character, and you do not strike me as someone who would steal without reason. Besides, even if I am wrong, the worst that happens is the ranch gets a cook for a few weeks. Samuel will not complain about that. Zelda wanted to refuse on principle. She had been taking care of herself for so long that accepting help felt like weakness, like giving up control. But her arm was throbbing despite the herbs, and she was exhausted, and the thought of a safe place to rest, even temporarily, was almost unbearably tempting. I will not be able to work much with this arm, she warned. You will do what you can. We will figure out the rest. Yates stood again and offered his hand, and this time, after a long moment of hesitation, Zelda took it. His palm was warm and rough against hers, and when he pulled her to her feet, she swayed slightly and found herself closer to him than she had intended. He smelled like leather and sage and clean sweat, and when he steadied her with a hand on her shoulder, she felt that strange jolt again, stronger this time. Can you ride? He asked, his voice low. I can ride? Good. My horse can carry us both to where you left your mount, and then we will head to the ranch. It is about a 2-hour ride from here. Zelda realized she was still holding his hand and quickly let go, stepping back. I need to get the strongbox first. Where is it? She hesitated again, but she had already come this far. 2 miles back, in a hollow tree near a creek bend. I know the place. Come on. He helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her, and Zelda found herself acutely aware of his body against her back, his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. She had been so focused on avoiding people, on staying distant and safe, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be close to someone, to feel the simple comfort of another person's presence. It terrified her almost as much as it appealed to her. They rode in silence, and Zelda found herself relaxing against him, despite her better judgment. The motion of the horse was soothing, and the combination of exhaustion, blood loss, and herbs was making her drowsy. She caught herself nodding off once and jerked upright, and felt Yates shift slightly behind her. You can sleep if you need to, he said. I will not let you fall. I do not need to sleep. Stubborn, he said again, and she thought she heard amusement in his voice. They found her horse, a sturdy roan mare she had bought in Wyoming, grazing near where she had left it. The animal nickered when it saw her, and Zelda felt a rush of relief that it had not wandered off. Yates helped her down, then dismounted himself and checked the mare over with a practiced eye. Good horse, he said approvingly. Where did you get her? Bought her honestly, if that is what you are asking. I was not asking that, but he smiled as he said it. Show me where this tree is. Zelda led him to the creek, moving slowly because her arm was starting to hurt again and her legs felt weak. The hollow tree was where she had left it, and she reached inside with her good arm and pulled out the strongbox. It was smaller than a bread box, made of dark wood with iron corners and a heavy lock that had been broken during the robbery. Yates took it from her and hefted it, his expression thoughtful. This is going to be a problem to travel with. If anyone sees it, they will ask questions. I can hide it in my saddlebags. Too obvious. Here, let me think. He looked around, then nodded to himself. I have got a better idea. We will take it to the ranch tonight and hide it there. No one goes into the bunkhouse where I stay except me and one other hand, and he is off visiting family in Minnesota for the next month. It will be safer than carrying it around. Zelda wanted to argue, but he was right. Traveling with the strongbox was dangerous, especially now that she was wounded and weak. All right, she said finally, but I want to see where you hide it. Of course. He secured the box in his own saddlebags, distributing the weight carefully, then helped Zelda onto her mare. She settled into the saddle with a wince, and Yates frowned. "How is your arm feeling?" "Like I got shot and then spent the afternoon being dragged around the prairie," Zelda said dryly. "The honesty is refreshing." He mounted his bay and turned it east. "The ranch is this way. Stay close, and if you start feeling faint, you tell me right away. Understood?" Zelda wanted to bristle at being given orders, but she was too tired to argue. She nudged her mare forward and fell into step beside Yates, and they rode together across the vast Dakota grassland as the afternoon sun began its slow descent toward evening. They talked as they rode, or rather Yates talked and Zelda listened, occasionally offering a short response. He told her about the Rocking M Ranch, how it had been established 15 years ago by Samuel Martin and his late wife, how it ran about 500 head of cattle and employed a dozen hands year-round. He told her about the land, the way it looked in spring when the wildflowers bloomed, the harsh beauty of winter when the snow covered everything in white silence. He told her about his mother, how she had taught him to track game and read weather and find water in the driest places. "She left her people to marry my father," Yates said, and there was something complicated in his voice. "He was a trapper, a white man who came west looking for beaver pelts. They loved each other, but it was hard for both of them. Her family never forgave her for leaving, and his family back in Pennsylvania never acknowledged that he had married an Indian woman. When he died in a trapping accident, she had nowhere to go. We drifted for a while before settling near Bismarck. She worked as a laundress and took in mending, and I did whatever jobs I could find. She never complained, never regretted her choice. She said love was worth any price." Zelda felt something twist in her chest at those words. Love. She had given up on that idea a long time ago. Love was just another word for weakness, for vulnerability, for giving someone the power to hurt you. But the way Yates spoke about his mother, the tenderness in his voice, made her wonder if maybe she had been wrong, if maybe love could be something different than what she had always believed. "What about your father?" Yates asked, pulling her from her thoughts. "You said he taught you about herbs." "He did. He was a good man when he was sober, which was not often after my mother died. She passed giving birth to my youngest brother, and my father blamed himself, started drinking to forget, and just never stopped. The drink made him careless. One night, he knocked over a lamp and the house caught fire. My brother was only 5. He did not make it out." Zelda had not spoken about that night in years, and she was not sure why she was telling Yates now. Maybe it was because he had shared his own story, or maybe it was because she was tired and hurt and her defenses were down. Either way, once she started talking, the words kept coming. "My father died 6 months later. The doctor said it was pneumonia, but I think he just gave up. I was 17, alone, with nothing but the clothes I was wearing and my father's old herb journal. I have been moving ever since, working whatever jobs I could find, never staying long enough for anyone to get too close." "That sounds lonely," Yates said quietly. "It is safer than the alternative. Maybe. Or maybe you have just been unlucky in the people you have met." Zelda did not have an answer for that, so she said nothing. They rode on in silence until the sun was low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and then Yates pointed ahead to where a cluster of buildings sat in a shallow valley, dark shapes against the fading light. "The Rocking M," he said. "We are home." The word home sent an unexpected pang through Zelda. She had not had a home in 6 years. She was not sure she remembered what it felt like. As they approached the ranch, Zelda could make out the details. There was a large main house with a wide porch, several smaller outbuildings, a big barn, and a series of corrals where horses moved like shadows in the dusk. The whole place had a well-maintained look that spoke of hard work and care. A man stepped out of the barn as they rode up, holding a lantern. He was older, maybe 50, with silver-shot hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent his life outdoors. His eyes were sharp and assessing as he looked from Yates to Zelda and back again. "Yates," he said, "was not expecting you back until tomorrow. I ran into some trouble on the trail, Samuel. This is Zelda Morgan. She needs a place to stay for a while, and I told her we could use a cook." Samuel's gaze went to Zelda's bandaged arm, and something flickered in his expression. "That looks recent?" "It is," Zelda said, meeting his eyes steadily. "I can work. I am a good cook, and I will earn my keep." "I do not doubt it." Samuel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, we can always use help in the kitchen. Mary, our usual cook, has been complaining about the workload with all the extra hands we took on for the season. You can bunk in the small room off the kitchen in the main house. Yates, get her settled and bring her to dinner. I want to hear the full story later." "Yes, sir." Yates dismounted and came to help Zelda down from her mare. She was stiff from the ride, and her arm was throbbing again, but she managed to keep her feet when her boots hit the ground. Yates kept a hand on her elbow, steadying her. "Come on," he said. "I will show you where everything is." He led her to the main house, carrying both his saddlebags and hers. The kitchen was warm and spacious, with a large wood stove and a long table where the hands obviously took their meals. A plump woman with gray-streaked hair and a kind face looked up from where she was stirring a pot and smiled. "Mary, this is Zelda Morgan. She is going to be helping you in the kitchen for a while." Mary's eyes went straight to the bandage. "Oh, you poor dear. What happened?" "Long story," Zelda said. "I promise I can still work." "We will see about that tomorrow. For now, you look like you need rest more than anything." Mary wiped her hands on her apron and gestured to a door at the back of the kitchen. "That is your room there. It is small, but it is clean and private. There is a wash basin and pitcher, and I will bring you some dinner shortly. Yates, you help her get settled." The room was indeed small, barely big enough for the narrow bed, small dresser, and single chair it contained, but it was clean, as Mary had said, and it had a window that looked out over the prairie. To Zelda, who had spent nights sleeping in stables and under wagons, it looked like luxury. Yates set her saddlebag on the dresser and his own on the floor. "I am going to hide the strongbox in my bunk. You can come check on it tomorrow after you have rested." "Thank you," Zelda said. The words felt inadequate for everything he had done, but she did not know what else to say. Yates hesitated at the door, then turned back to her. "I am glad I found you today," he said quietly. "I know you do not trust easily, and I know you have got reasons for that. But you are safe here, Zelda. I give you my word." Before she could respond, he was gone, and Zelda was left standing alone in the small room, her arm aching and her head spinning, and her heart doing something strange and uncomfortable in her chest. She sat down on the bed carefully and pressed her good hand to her face, feeling the grit of dust and sweat and dried blood. She should not be here. She should have refused his help, should have insisted on handling things herself the way she always did. Getting involved with people, letting them close, only led to pain. She had learned that lesson over and over again. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Yates's face, the genuine concern in his eyes, the gentle way he had tended her wound. She heard his voice talking about his mother, about love being worth any price. And for the first time in 6 years, Zelda let herself wonder if maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong about some things. Mary brought her dinner on a tray, beef stew, fresh bread, and strong coffee. Zelda ate mechanically, too tired to taste much, and then stripped off her dusty, blood-stained clothes and washed herself as best she could with the pitcher and basin. The bandage on her arm was still clean and secure, and the ache had dulled to a manageable throb. She pulled on her spare shirt, a plain cotton thing that had seen better days, and fell into bed. She expected to lie awake worrying, the way she always did in new places. But exhaustion pulled her under almost immediately, and she slept dreamlessly until the first light of dawn crept through the window. When she woke, her arm was stiff, but the pain was less acute, and she felt clear-headed for the first time since the robbery. She dressed quickly and went into the kitchen, where Mary was already starting breakfast. "Morning, dear," Mary said cheerfully. "How are you feeling?" "Better." Zelda looked around the kitchen, taking in the organization, the supplies, the layout. "What can I do to help?" "Bless you, but are you sure? That arm will heal faster if I keep moving. Put me to work, Mary." The older woman smiled. "All right then. You can start by mixing up biscuits. There is flour in that barrel, lard in the crock, and buttermilk in the cold box. The hands will be in for breakfast in about an hour, and they will eat anything not nailed down." Zelda set to work and found herself falling into the familiar rhythm of cooking. Her father had taught her to bake before he taught her anything else, and her hands remembered the motion of cutting lard into flour, the feel of dough coming together under her fingers. She shaped the biscuits one-handed, Mary helping with the parts that required 2 hands, and soon they had trays ready to go into the oven. The hands started filtering in as the sun rose higher, a mix of young and old men who looked at Zelda with curiosity, but did not ask questions. Yates came in with the last group, and when his eyes found her across the kitchen, he smiled. It was a small smile, private and just for her, and Zelda felt that strange jolt again, like lightning under her skin. Breakfast was a loud, chaotic affair, with the men eating and talking and joking, and Zelda stayed in the background, helping Mary serve and clean up. She was used to being invisible, used to keeping her head down and not drawing attention, but she felt Yates watching her, and every time she glanced his way, he was looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. After breakfast, when the hands had dispersed to their various chores, Yates approached her. "How was your arm this morning?" "Better, the herbs helped." "Good, come with me. I want to show you where I put the strongbox, and we need to change that bandage." He led her across the yard to a long, low building that served as the bunkhouse. Inside, it was dim and smelled of leather and tobacco and unwashed men, with rows of narrow bunks along each wall. Yates went to one at the far end and knelt, pulling out a wooden crate from underneath. "It is in here, wrapped in my spare blanket. No one will bother it." Zelda knelt beside him and looked at the crate, reassuring herself that the strongbox was still there. Satisfied, she nodded. "Thank you. Now, let me see that arm." They went outside into the morning light, and Yates carefully unwrapped the bandage. The wound looked better, less inflamed, though still angry and raw. He cleaned it with fresh water and applied more of the herb paste, his touch as gentle as it had been the day before. "You are good at this," Zelda said, watching his face as he worked. "I have had practice. Ranch work means injuries. Samuel does not believe in doctors unless it is absolutely necessary, so I am usually the one patching people up." He finished wrapping the fresh bandage and tied it off. "This should be fine for another day or two. Then we can leave it uncovered to let the air help it heal." "Where did you learn to do this? Your mother taught you about herbs, but not bandaging, surely." "No, that I learned from necessity." Yates sat back, his eyes distant. "When my mother was dying, I tried everything I could to save her. I read every book I could get my hands on, talked to every healer I could find. It was not enough, but I learned a lot in the process." "I am sorry," Zelda said softly. "Losing someone like that is hard." "It is. But she taught me that life goes on, that the best way to honor the people we have lost is to keep living, keep helping others. So that is what I do." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Zelda felt like he was seeing past all her defenses, past the walls she had built so carefully. "What about you? What keeps you going?" "Stubbornness mostly," Zelda said, trying to make it sound light. "And fear." "Fear of what?" "Of ending up like my father, of giving up, of letting the world break me." "That takes strength," Yates said, "more strength than most people have. You should be proud of that." No one had ever said anything like that to her before, and Zelda felt her throat tighten dangerously. She stood quickly, putting distance between them. "I should get back to the kitchen. Mary will need help with lunch." "Zelda, wait." Yates stood too, and when she turned to look at him, his expression was earnest. "I know you are used to being alone, to not trusting people, but you do not have to be alone here. I meant what I said yesterday. You are safe here, and if you need help, with the strongbox or anything else, I will be here." "Why?" The question burst out of her before she could stop it. "Why do you care what happens to me? You do not know me." "Maybe not yet," Yates said, "but I would like to, if you will let me." Zelda did not know what to say to that. She had spent so long keeping people at arm's length that the idea of letting someone close, of letting Yates close, terrified her. But there was something in his eyes, something honest and open and kind, that made her want to take the risk. "I have to go," she said finally, and walked away before she could do something foolish like cry or tell him the truth about how much his kindness meant to her. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Zelda worked in the kitchen with Mary, cooking meals for the ranch hands and learning the particular quirks of the wood stove and the way supplies were stored. Her arm healed steadily, the infection clearing as the herbs did their work. Yates changed her bandage every day, his hands gentle and sure, and they talked while he worked. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about life on the ranch, about the cattle drives he had been on, about the time he helped deliver a foal in the middle of a thunderstorm. She told him about the places she had been, the jobs she had worked, the strange and sometimes wonderful people she had met in her years of drifting. She did not tell him about the nights she had gone hungry, or the times she had been propositioned or threatened, or the bone-deep loneliness that sometimes threatened to swallow her whole. But she suspected he knew anyway, from the way he listened, from the way he looked at her like she was brave instead of broken. On the fourth day, Samuel asked to speak with her in his office. Zelda went with a knot of anxiety in her stomach, wondering if he had heard something about the stagecoach robbery, if he was going to ask her to leave. But when she entered the office, Samuel just gestured for her to sit and poured her a cup of coffee. "Yates told me about the strong box," he said without preamble. "He told me what happened with the stagecoach robbery." Zelda felt her whole body tense. "I see. I want you to know that I appreciate honesty, and I appreciate someone who stands up to thieves. What you did was brave, if maybe not the wisest choice." Samuel sipped his coffee, studying her over the rim. "But it puts us all in a difficult position. If the law comes looking for you, or worse, if those robbers track you here, it could mean trouble for the whole ranch." "I understand. I will leave." "I did not say that." Samuel held up a hand. "I said it is difficult, not impossible. Here is what I propose. You stay here, keep working, keep healing. In the meantime, I will make some inquiries in Bismarck, see what the situation is with the robbery, and whether the law is actually looking for anyone. If it seems safe, we will figure out a way to return the strongbox anonymously. If not, we will find another solution. Does that sound fair?" "More than fair," Zelda said, surprised. "But why would you do that? Why risk your ranch for someone you barely know?" "Because Yates vouched for you, and I trust his judgment, and because I have spent enough time in this territory to know that the law does not always represent justice. Sometimes good people have to do questionable things to set things right." Samuel smiled slightly. "Besides, Mary tells me you make the best biscuits she has ever tasted. I am not about to let that talent go to waste." Despite herself, Zelda laughed. It felt strange and rusty, like a door that had not been opened in a long time. "Thank you, Samuel. I will not let you down." "I know you will not." That evening, after the dinner dishes were washed and put away, Yates found Zelda sitting on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set over the prairie. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and for a while they just sat in comfortable silence. "Samuel talked to you," Yates said finally. "He did. He is a good man. He is. One of the best I have known." Yates stretched his legs out in front of him. "How is your arm feeling?" "Almost healed. You did good work." "We did good work. You are tough, Zelda. Most people would still be in bed after what you went through." "I have had worse," Zelda said without thinking, and immediately regretted it when she saw Yates's expression darken. "That should not be something you have to say." "Maybe not, but it is the truth." Yates was quiet for a moment, then turned to look at her. "What are you going to do? After all this is sorted out with the strongbox, are you going to keep drifting?" Zelda did not have an answer. A week ago, she would have said yes without hesitation. Moving on was what she did. It was who she was. But sitting here on this porch, with the evening breeze cooling her skin and Yates beside her, she found herself wanting something different. She wanted to stay. She wanted to keep working in Mary's kitchen, wanted to keep talking to Yates while he changed her bandages, wanted to keep feeling like maybe she belonged somewhere. "I do not know," she said honestly. "What would you want me to do?" Yates looked surprised, then something warmer spread across his face. "I would want you to stay, for however long you felt comfortable." "Why?" "Because I like having you here. Because you make me laugh, and you challenge me, and when I talk to you, I feel like you actually listen. Because when I found you in that grass, bleeding and stubborn and brave, something shifted in me. I cannot explain it any better than that." Zelda's heart was hammering in her chest. "Yates, I am not good at this, at people, at getting close. I will probably disappoint you." "I doubt that, but even if you do, I would rather take that chance than wonder what might have happened." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm against hers, and Zelda felt that jolt again, stronger than ever. "I am not asking you to promise me forever. I am just asking you to stay a little while longer. See what happens." Zelda looked down at their joined hands, at the way her smaller fingers fit between his work-roughened ones. She thought about all the reasons she should say no, all the ways this could end badly. But she also thought about Yates's mother, who had said love was worth any price, and about the way Yates looked at her like she was something precious instead of something broken. "All right," she said quietly. "I will stay, for a little while." Yates smiled, and this time it was a full, genuine smile that transformed his face. "Good," he said. "That is really good, Zelda." They sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to emerge, one by one, in the vast Dakota sky. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Zelda felt like maybe she had found a place she could rest. The days turned into weeks, and Zelda settled into life at the Rocking M Ranch in ways she had never expected. She found she enjoyed the routine of cooking for the hands, the challenge of making simple ingredients stretch into satisfying meals. Mary taught her ranch recipes she had never learned in Ohio, how to make son of a gun stew and sourdough bread that rose reliably in the temperamental oven, how to preserve vegetables and smoke meat for the long winter ahead. More than that, she found herself enjoying the people. Samuel was gruff but fair, quick to praise good work, and quicker to help when someone needed it. Mary was endlessly kind, full of stories about the ranch's early days, and always ready with a cup of coffee and a sympathetic ear. The hands treated her with respect, never pressing for information about her past or making her feel uncomfortable. It was the closest thing to a family Zelda had felt since her father died. And then there was Yates. He had become part of her daily routine in ways both small and significant. He still changed her bandage each morning, even after the wound had healed enough that she could have done it herself. They would sit together in the early light, and he would check the fading scar on her arm while they talked about their plans for the day. Sometimes he brought her wildflowers he had found on his morning rides, presenting them with a shy smile that made her heart do foolish things. In the evenings after dinner, they would walk together along the creek that ran through the ranch property, talking until the stars came out. Zelda found herself learning things about him that made her care for him more with each passing day. She learned that he had a talent for gentling horses, that he could calm even the wildest bronco with patience and soft words. She learned that he sent half his wages to a charity in Bismarck that helped orphan children because his mother had always believed in helping those less fortunate. She learned that he wanted to have his own ranch someday, a place where he could raise horses and maybe a family if he was lucky enough to find someone who wanted to share that dream. She learned, most importantly, that he was nothing like the men she had spent years avoiding. He was kind without expecting anything in return. He was strong without being cruel. He made her laugh and made her think, and made her feel safe in ways she had forgotten were possible. And she was falling in love with him. The realization hit her one evening about 3 weeks after she had arrived at the ranch. They were sitting by the creek, watching the water flow past, and Yates was telling her a story about a cattle drive that had gone wrong in spectacular fashion. He was animated, gesturing with his hands, his eyes bright with laughter, and Zelda felt something crack open in her chest. This was what love looked like, she thought. This easy companionship, this warmth, this feeling of being known and valued and cared for. It was not the grand passion she had read about in the few novels that had come her way, but it was something better. It was real. The thought terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. "Zelda?" Yates had stopped talking and was looking at her with concern. "Are you all right? You look like you have seen a ghost." "I am fine," she said quickly. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how much things have changed since you found me." She looked out at the water, not trusting herself to meet his eyes. "I was prepared to die out there, Yates. I had accepted it. And then you showed up and helped me, and you brought me here, and you have been nothing but kind to me. I do not know how to repay that." "You do not have to repay it. That is not how kindness works." Yates shifted closer, and Zelda felt his hand cover hers on the grass. "But if you want to thank me, you can tell me the truth about something. Are you happy here?" "Yes," Zelda said, and realized it was true. "Happier than I have been in years." "Good. Because I want you to be happy, Zelda. I want you to feel like you can stay here as long as you want, that you do not have to keep running." He took a breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower, more intense. "I want you to know that I have come to care for you a great deal, more than I probably should, given that we have only known each other a few weeks. But I cannot help it. You are brave and stubborn and beautiful, and when I am with you, I feel like the world makes more sense." Zelda's breath caught in her throat. "Yates, you do not have to say anything back. I just wanted you to know, so that when you make your decision about whether to stay or go, you have all the information." He squeezed her hand gently. "I would very much like for you to stay." Zelda turned to look at him then, and saw everything she felt reflected in his eyes. He cared for her, maybe even loved her, though it was too soon for either of them to say that word. And the remarkable thing was that she believed him. She believed that his feelings were real, that he was not trying to manipulate or control her. He just wanted her to be happy, and he wanted to be part of that happiness if she would let him. "I want to stay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am scared, Yates. I am scared of getting hurt, of letting myself care too much, of losing this when it is the best thing that has happened to me in so long, but I want to stay." Yates's face broke into a smile that was equal parts relief and joy. "Then stay, and I promise I will do everything I can to make sure you never regret it." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and tentative, and Zelda felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump. But instead of fear, she felt something like freedom. She kissed him back, her hand coming up to cup his cheek, and let herself fall. When they finally pulled apart, Yates was still smiling. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted. "You could have," Zelda said, feeling breathless and giddy, and more alive than she had in years. "I would not have stopped you." "Good to know." He kissed her again, longer this time, and Zelda let herself sink into it, into him, into this feeling of being wanted and cared for. They walked back to the ranch hand in hand as the stars came out, and Zelda felt like everything in her life had been leading to this moment. All the running, all the pain, all the loneliness it had brought her here, to this place, to this man. And for the first time since her father died, she let herself believe that maybe happy endings were possible after all. The next morning, Samuel returned from Bismarck with news about the stagecoach robbery. Zelda was helping Mary prepare breakfast when he called her into his office, and Yates came too, standing beside her in a show of support that made her grateful and warm. "I spoke with the sheriff in Bismarck," Samuel said, settling into his desk chair. "The good news is that they are not looking for a woman in connection with the robbery. The robbers are well-known outlaws, and the focus is entirely on catching them, not on recovering the strongbox. In fact, the sheriff seemed surprised when I mentioned it had been taken. He assumed the robbers still had it." "So, I am not in trouble with the law?" Zelda asked, hardly daring to believe it. "No, though I would still advise caution in returning the strongbox. If you waltz into town and hand it over, people will ask questions about where you found it and why you had it. Better to make it look like it was recovered by chance." Samuel pulled out a piece of paper and studied it. "Here is what I propose. There is a church in Bismarck that collects donations for families affected by crimes. If the strongbox were to show up there, anonymously, the pastor would see that the money was returned to the rightful owners. No questions asked." "That sounds perfect," Zelda said, relief flooding through her. "How do we do it?" "Yates and I will take it into town next week, leave it at the church after dark. You stay here and keep cooking. The less you are connected to any of this, the better." Samuel looked between them, his sharp eyes missing nothing. "Though something tells me you might have other reasons for wanting to stay here now." Zelda felt her cheeks heat, and beside her, Yates chuckled. "You are not wrong, Samuel." "I thought not." Samuel smiled, and it softened his weathered face. "For what it is worth, I approve. You are both good people, and you deserve some happiness. Just do not let it interfere with your work." "No, sir," they said in unison, and Samuel laughed outright. The plan worked perfectly. A week later, Yates and Samuel took the strongbox to Bismarck and left it on the steps of the church, wrapped in oilcloth with a note explaining what it was. The pastor, true to his word, contacted the sheriff and the stagecoach company, and within days the money had been returned to those who had lost it in the robbery. Zelda heard the news from Mary, who had heard it from one of the hands who had gone into town for supplies, and she felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had been carrying for over a month. It was done. She was free. She could stop looking over her shoulder, stop worrying about the law or the robbers finding her. She could just be Zelda Morgan, cook at the Rockingham Ranch, and maybe, if she was very lucky, the woman who had stolen Yates Orson's heart just as surely as he had stolen hers. Summer deepened into autumn, and the ranch prepared for the coming winter. The cattle were brought down from the high pastures, supplies were laid in, and the hands worked from dawn to dusk to make sure everything was secure. Zelda worked just as hard, preserving vegetables from Mary's garden, smoking meat, baking bread that would be frozen and reheated during the coldest months. She had never felt more useful, more needed, more part of something larger than herself. Her relationship with Yates deepened too, growing from those first tentative kisses into something solid and real. They stole moments together whenever they could, early morning walks before the ranch woke up, evenings by the creek, quiet conversations in the kitchen after everyone else had gone to bed. He told her he loved her one night in October, the words simple and sincere, and she said it back without hesitation because it was true. She loved him. She loved his kindness and his strength and the way he looked at her like she hung the moon. She loved the life they were building together, even if they had not yet talked about what that might look like long term. That conversation came on a cold November evening when the first snow of the season was falling outside, and they were huddled together by the fire in the main house. Samuel and Mary had gone to bed early, and the hands were in the bunkhouse, leaving Zelda and Yates alone in the warm, flickering light. "I have been thinking," Yates said, his arm around her shoulders as she leaned against him. "About the future, about what I want." "What do you want?" Zelda asked, though she thought she might already know. "I want to build a house on a piece of land Samuel has agreed to sell me, about 5 miles east of here. It is good land, with water and timber, and I think I could make something of it. Raise horses, maybe a few cattle, build a life." He paused, and Zelda felt his heart beating faster against her side. "I want to build that life with you, Zelda. If you will have me." Zelda pulled back so she could look at his face. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Yes, I know it is fast, and I know you might not be ready, but I cannot imagine my future without you in it. I love you, Zelda. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a house with you and fill it with laughter and maybe, someday, children. I want to grow old with you on this prairie and never stop being grateful that I found you that day." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, simple silver with a small blue stone. "This was my mother's. I would be honored if you would wear it." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. She had spent so many years afraid of this moment, convinced that letting someone close would only lead to pain. But Yates had shown her that love did not have to hurt, that it could be gentle and constant and true. He had shown her that home was not a place but a person, and she had found her home in him. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you, Yates. I want all of those things too. I want to build a life with you and fill a house with love. I want to be your wife." Yates's face lit up with pure joy, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting all this time for her. Then he kissed her, deep and passionate and full of promise, and Zelda kissed him back with everything she had. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Samuel officiating and Mary standing as witness. Zelda wore a dress Mary had helped her sew, simple blue cotton that matched her eyes, and Yates wore his best shirt and a tie that he kept adjusting nervously until Zelda laughed and told him to stop. The vows they spoke were traditional, but felt entirely new when spoken with such sincerity, and when Yates kissed her as his wife, Zelda felt like her life was finally beginning. They spent their wedding night in Yates's bunk at the ranch since their house was not yet built, but neither of them cared. They were together, and that was all that mattered. Yates was gentle and patient, mindful that this was new for Zelda, and he made her feel cherished and loved in ways she had never imagined possible. They talked late into the night, making plans for their future, dreaming out loud about the house they would build and the life they would create. Winter came in earnest, and they spent it preparing. Yates worked on the house whenever the weather allowed, and Zelda continued cooking at the ranch, saving every penny of her wages towards supplies and furniture. Samuel gave them a wedding gift of lumber and nails, and Mary gave them quilts and kitchen tools and a rocking chair that had belonged to her grandmother. The other hands pitched in too, helping with the construction during their rare free time, and by the time spring arrived, the house was nearly complete. It was small but sturdy, one large room that would serve as kitchen and living area, a separate bedroom, and a loft for future children. There was a porch that looked out over the prairie, where Zelda imagined them sitting in the evenings, watching the sun set. Yates had built her a herb garden near the house, with good soil and a fence to keep out the rabbits, and he had constructed a small stable for the horses they would raise. They moved in on a warm April day in 1884, carrying their few possessions across the prairie to their new home. Zelda stood in the doorway that first evening, looking out at the land that was now theirs, and felt a sense of peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I am thinking about how far I have come. A year ago, I was alone and hurt and convinced I would never have a home again. And now I have all of this. I have you and this house and a future I actually want to live." She turned in his arms and looked up at him. "Thank you for finding me that day. Thank you for helping me gather those herbs and for convincing me to stay. Thank you for loving me." "Thank you for letting me," Yates said and kissed her forehead. "This is just the beginning, Zelda. We are going to build something wonderful here. I know it." And they did. Over the next few years, they built a life that exceeded even their most optimistic dreams. Yates's horse breeding operation thrived, earning a reputation for quality animals that spread throughout the territory. Zelda's herb garden grew into a small business of its own, with people coming from Bismarck and beyond to buy her remedies and tinctures. They added on to the house, building a proper kitchen and an extra bedroom, and filled it with furniture Yates made with his own hands. In the spring of 1885, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She told Yates over breakfast, watching his face transform from surprise to pure joy as the news sank in. He jumped up from the table and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. Their son was born that November, a healthy boy with Yates's dark hair and Zelda's blue eyes. They named him William, after Zelda's father, and Yates held him with such tenderness that Zelda fell in love with her husband all over again. William was followed by a daughter, Sarah, 2 years later, and then another son, James, 2 years after that. The house that had seemed so spacious became cramped and loud and full of life, and Zelda had never been happier. She thought often of that day when Yates had found her, bleeding and desperate in the prairie grass. She thought about how close she had come to dying, how easily things could have gone differently, but fate or luck or providence had put Yates in her path, and he had not just saved her life, he had given her a reason to live it fully. Yates told her once years later that he felt the same way. They were sitting on the porch, watching their children play in the yard, and he took her hand and said, "Finding you that day was the best thing that ever happened to me. You made me believe in things I had stopped hoping for." "What things?" Zelda asked, though she suspected she knew. "Family, home, love that lasts." He squeezed her hand. "My mother always said love was worth any price, and I never really understood what she meant until I met you. Now I know. This life we have built, these children, this feeling of being complete, it is worth everything. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Zelda leaned against him, her heart full. "So would I." They sat there as the sun set over the Dakota prairie, the same prairie where they had first met, and watched their children grow up strong and happy. William became a skilled horseman like his father, with a gentle way with animals and a kind heart. Sarah inherited her mother's knowledge of herbs and her fierce independence, and dreamed of becoming a doctor someday. James was still young, but he showed signs of having the best qualities of both his parents, Yates's patience and Zelda's determination. As the years passed, Yates and Zelda became pillars of the small community that grew up around Bismarck. They were known for their generosity, their willingness to help neighbors in need, their strong marriage that served as an example to younger couples. Samuel Martin, who lived to a ripe old age, said more than once that bringing Zelda to the ranch was the best decision Yates ever made, second only to asking her to marry him. Mary, who became like a mother to Zelda, taught her everything she knew about cooking and life, and Zelda passed that knowledge on to Sarah. When Mary died peacefully in her sleep at age 72, Zelda wept as if she had lost her own mother, because in many ways she had. But she honored Mary's memory by continuing to cook the recipes she had learned, by treating people with the same kindness Mary had shown her. The Rockingham Ranch continued to thrive under Samuel's management, and when he finally retired, he sold it to a young couple who promised to maintain the traditions he and his late wife had established. Yates and Zelda attended the sale and felt a bittersweet nostalgia for the place where their story had begun, but they were happy with the life they had created on their own land. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Yates took Zelda back to the spot where he had found her. It was a warm summer day, much like the day they had met, and the prairie was golden with grass and dotted with wildflowers. They stood together, hand in hand, and looked out over the land that had brought them together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had ridden a different way that day?" Yates asked. "No," Zelda said immediately, "because I think somehow we were always meant to find each other. Maybe not that day, maybe not in that way, but eventually. We were meant to be together, Yates. I am sure of it. I am sure of it too." He pulled her close and kissed her, and it was just as sweet and full of promise as their first kiss had been all those years ago. "I love you, Zelda Morgan Orson. I have loved you from the moment I saw you lying in that grass, stubborn and brave and refusing to give up. And I will love you until my last breath." "I love you too," Zelda whispered against his lips. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for helping me gather those herbs. Thank you for giving me a life I never dreamed I could have." "Thank you for letting me," Yates said, echoing the words from their wedding night. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, on us. Thank you for making me the happiest man in the territory." They stood there in the place where their story began, surrounded by the prairie they both loved, and felt the weight of all the years behind them and all the years still to come. They had built something lasting, something real, something worth every struggle and every sacrifice. They had built a life based on love and trust and the simple act of one person helping another in a moment of need. And as they walked back to their horses, hand in hand as always, Zelda thought about how she had been searching for herbs to treat her wounds that day, desperate and alone. She had found the herbs, yes, but she had found so much more. She had found healing in Yates's gentle hands, safety in his presence, and love in his steady heart. She had found a home, not just in the house they built together, but in him. The cowboy had found her and helped her gather herbs, yes. But in doing so, he had gathered her up too, had collected all her broken pieces and helped her become whole again. And she had done the same for him, had shown him that the love his mother spoke of was real and possible and worth believing in. Their story was not the grand adventure of dime novels or the tragic romance of poetry. It was simpler and truer than that. Two people who found each other when they needed it most, who chose each other every day, who built a life one moment at a time until those moments became years, and those years became a legacy. William grew up and started his own horse ranch in Montana, marrying a schoolteacher from Bismarck and giving Yates and Zelda their first grandchildren. Sarah went east to study medicine, becoming one of the first female doctors in the territory and returning to open a practice in Bismarck, where she used her mother's herbal knowledge alongside modern medicine. James took over the family ranch, expanding it and continuing the traditions his parents had established. Yates and Zelda grew old together on their prairie land, their hair turning silver, their faces gaining lines from years of laughter and sun. They sat on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset, and talked about their children and grandchildren and the life they had built. When Yates died at the age of 78, peacefully in his sleep with Zelda beside him, she mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had loved each other well and truly for over 40 years, and she had no regrets about a single day of it. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, sharing stories about their father and grandfather, teaching them about herbs and healing and the importance of helping others. On the day Zelda died, at the age of 81, she was sitting in her herb garden, the one Yates had built for her all those years ago. Sarah found her there, peaceful and still, her hands full of yarrow flowers. It seemed fitting somehow that she should end where she began, with the herbs that had brought Yates into her life. They buried her next to Yates on a hill overlooking their land, with a simple stone that read, "Zelda Morgan Orson, beloved wife, mother, and healer. She was searching, and she found home." The story of how they met, of the cowboy who found the injured woman and helped her gather herbs, became family legend, passed down through generations. Their great-grandchildren told it to their children, and those children told it to theirs, until it became part of the fabric of the family's history. But more than the story, what lasted was the legacy they left behind, a legacy of kindness, of helping others, of choosing love even when it scared you. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried that forward, building their own lives based on the example Yates and Zelda had set. The house Yates built still stood 100 years later, lovingly maintained by descendants who understood its significance. The herb garden still bloomed each spring, replanted and tended by hands that remembered what it meant. And on warm summer evenings, if you stood in just the right spot on the prairie, you could almost see them, a young cowboy and a wounded woman, gathering herbs together, falling in love, building something that would outlast them both. Because that is what real love does. It starts with a simple act of kindness, a moment of connection between two people. It grows through patience and trust and the daily choice to care for each other. And if you are very lucky, if you nurture it and protect it and let it flourish, it becomes something that transcends time itself. Yates Orson found Zelda Morgan on a summer day in 1883, and in helping her gather herbs to treat her wounds, he found his own healing. She was brave and he was kind, and together they proved that love does not have to be complicated to be profound. Sometimes the greatest love stories are the simplest ones. Two people who meet when they need each other most, who choose each other every day, who build a life that matters. They were searching, she for herbs, he for purpose, and they found each other. And in that finding, they discovered everything they had been looking for all along: home, family, belonging, and a love that would echo through generations. Their story ended where all good love stories should, with two people who lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. They had their happy ending, not because everything was perfect, but because they faced life together, gathering not just herbs, but moments, memories, and a love that proved, once and for all, that sometimes getting lost is the only way to find what you are really searching for. And so, the prairie grass grew tall over their graves, and the wildflowers bloomed each spring, and the wind carried whispers of their story across the Dakota plains. The cowboy and the woman he found, the herbs they gathered together, the love they built from simple kindness, it all became part of the land itself, eternal and unchanging as the sky above. This was their story. This was their legacy. This was proof that even in the harsh reality of the Wild West, where survival often meant hardness and solitude, there was room for tenderness, for connection, for love. All it took was one person willing to help, one person willing to trust, and two hearts brave enough to take a chance on each other. Yates and Zelda took that chance, and it made all the difference.